Um, his experience as a consultant has allowed him to gain deep understanding on how farms operate efficiently, optimizing resources to maximize profit. Furthermore, his working in gardening and nurseries introduced him to the countless species of agave and cactus with great potential to strengthen agriculture in California. And Steve, it is a pleasure having you here. It might be like 3, 4 months last time that we visit on your farm. It was a really nice experience. He hosted us, and it was really eye-opening. And I think along those visits, that's when we were able to kind of come up with this invitation and ideas for dry farming and cold species in California. So, Steve, welcome.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks. Nice to see everyone here today. Um, so yeah, like Sam was mentioning, I'm a agave farmer, third generation. So I learned from, my father and my grandfather, and they didn't only farm agave, they did cactus and goats as well. So I kind of continued that in the United States. And when I first started my agave farm, I didn't want to. I took a lot of environmental science classes at UC Santa Barbara, and I didn't want to, put any added pressure on the water systems. So, we studied a lot of water policy, and at that time, when I was in college, they were, passing the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, which, Sam talks a lot about on his podcast Water Talk. But after studying a lot of this stuff, I realized we were only going to have less and less water the further along we went with agriculture in California. And the surface water was going down, the aquifers, many of them were collapsing. That was a lot of the inspiration for the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. So now they started regulating a lot of the groundwater, and they started putting limits on how much you could pump, and charging people for setting up wells, and for drawing from those wells per acre foot. You get charged a certain amount in many of those districts now, where they're trying to bring people that aquifer into compliance. So after studying a lot of water policy, and sustainability around water, I realized that if I wanted to start a farm, I needed to choose something that was very low water, first of all. But second of all, it was going to be very difficult for a new farmer like me to secure affordable water resources. So, for instance, I can hook up into the water grid and get water from the city, but if any farmer can tell you that the most expensive water there is from the city, right? That's the reason why many of them use surface and well water. So I realized if I wanted to scale a farm, it wouldn't really be sustainable to do it with surface or aquifer water. So there was just too much pressure on it. So I went back to tradition and just focused what my family had been working for generations. And my grandpa, I was telling him that I had bought my farm, and I wanted to start farming grapes, and he told me I was crazy because it was going to be really water and labor intensive. And my father and me worked in grapes at the time, so I knew he wasn't lying, but it just was my first idea with the land. But after talking with him a lot, I realized I should probably go back to my tradition. And I really came to that idea when I went to Mexico and visited some of my family's agave farms out there, because dry farming may be a new concept for Americans, but dry farming is actually how a lot of the agriculture is done in Mexico, in my part, especially in Jalisco. So they dry farm, for instance, corn off just rain, and they also dry farm agave and cactus and several different other crops just off the rain. So they may only get a certain amount of harvest, or sometimes may not harvest depending on that rain. But traditionally, it's all been done that way. So that was the other thing I was realizing, that even in my areas where they were dry farming, it was you know, harder and harder to do stuff like corn and vegetable crops because of inconsistent rain. So, agave and cactus seemed the more attractive option to me there. Um, and then, I realized pretty early on that uh, I needed to do something like dry farming because there just wasn't going to be a lot of opportunity for me to develop my farm past a small acreage. So I naturally decided on agave in around 2016, and I started cultivating it, as well as cactus and goats. And so that today I wanted to obviously be here and talk to everyone here about dry farming because I found a lot of success in it, and the majority of my farm is now solely dry farmed, except for the portion that is I consider like my nursery, so it's propagation area. But once plants reach a certain age, they're all going into the field, and that age is depending on the species in between, a 6-inch plant, for instance, from a second or third generation Amole or Agave Vilmoreana, which I've propagated out several generations already. So it's a little bit stronger on the farm. And then some other plants that I may be bringing from other nurseries, I may be planting them out at a 3 or 5 gallon out in the field because, I try to plant out in the rainy season right around now, actually. So I got a few small rains probably like 3 weeks ago, and then I got right to planting. I harvested lots of agave stalks that were ready, and lots of cactus, and I started planting. Um, in the past month, I've probably planted over 100,000 plants, and the reason behind that is because I have a very small window in the desert of a rainy season. So as soon as that first couple rains come that soak the soil sufficiently to where that moisture may stay for several weeks, I know that I can plant, even young plants in it, and establish them by the end of the rainy season. Um, and they're going to continue growing their whole life with minimal irrigation, right? So um, a lot of the nursery plants, I just develop them to a stage, in areas where I have a actual hookup to the water grid. So a lot of people find it really interesting that my farm doesn't even have a connection to the water grid at all. Like I'm running 100% off rainwater because I don't have a well, I don't have a hookup to the city water, and I have zero access to surface water. And I still managed to scale the farm. Now it's around 5 acres of stuff that I'm actually planting out. And
Steve,
hopefully by the end of, yeah.
Steve, so for kind of to be very specific on this one, so for
Mhm.
dry farming, so it has to be before the rain season, right? So try to make sure that you're catching or
I would
planting before
I
the
would
rainy
say
season, but
you have to prepare for it. Yeah. So ideally, by the time the rain is beginning in your area, you should already have your plants and what you want to put out in the field. Because as soon as that soil becomes saturated, you're going to want to start planting. And I mean, it's a thin window here in California. We may only have a couple months of consistent rain every month where some rains are coming. Here in the desert, we have, at least in my area, a combination of really clay and loam soil. So if we get a rain that's at least a half inch, I know I have 2 to 3 weeks of uh, the top layer of soil, which is, say, the 6 inches of soil that I'm putting out plants, that's going to be sufficiently moist to continue them. So you kind of want to plant in a time where you're going to be at least getting a rain every month. And that's the difficult portion of why you can only really do this, when your rainy season begins. And some years are better than others. I give an example. There's been years where we have a really great rainy season and everything establishes, and others where, like 2 years ago, I planted out, 50,000 plants and like maybe less than half of them made it. But the benefit there is that that is actually something that I want to happen because I propagate so many plants that I'm trying to pick the winners out of all of these plants. And if I know that half of these plants made it through the worst rainy season, that means that their genetics and their next offspring are going to make it through that. Whereas the other ones that died, it wouldn't be something you want to propagate if you're a dry farmer, right? So that actually is how you're prioritizing your genetics. So the more water resilient agave, cacti, that's what I'm trying to focus on. And even though they may be the same species or subspecies, there's slight differences. So I make sure to mark every single batch of propagated out agave that I have to make sure I could track all of that. Yeah.
And to
So I
be
mean,
very clear, so
mhm.
basically you wait for the first rain, and then once you have the first rain, those 3 first weeks are basically what you want to take advantage of, considering that there will be more rains after that, right?
Yes. The first month or two is really your best months because you can do this. Like I give an example. I've done various experiments where I've done, mass propagations out in the field, field ready crops that are, like I told you, anywhere from that 1 to 5 gallon, depending on the species. And I've already proven they could be put out in the rainy season and established after a rainy season, right? If I plant them at the beginning. Now I may plant them at the end of the rainy season. So say now I'm planting in, January or even February, which in Northern California, that may still be a significant, time where they're receiving rain. But for me, that's roughly the end of our rainy season. So we may not get more rain, but the soil is still may be moist throughout March until we start warming up again, right? So what I've seen is that if I do mass propagations that last month or two, only a quarter or half the plants may make it. So that may be something where, you can adapt and say, okay, if you have, water from extra water from rainwater or from city water surface, or, you have a well, then you could irrigate those and all of them it could survive. But if you're trying to be a dry farmer, like I just mentioned, you try to prioritize the genetics that can get better over time, not something that's going to need you to be babied, right? So I do even that in the greenhouses. Like a lot of people think I water my green in shade houses every day, but I'm going in there. I give an example. My 4 shade houses that I have on the farm here. Um, I'm following that model with most of my larger shade and greenhouses as well. And I maybe water them once every 3 to 6 weeks. And those plants, some of them may die. It may be a small 5 to 10%, but I'm okay with that. And that's why I propagate so much out so that I make sure that the strongest plants survive and I can make sure that, those plants are going to continue that trait going forward. So while other people in agave have been hybridizing or prioritizing seed genetics for color or for spines, I'm solely prioritizing for piña size and water efficiency, essentially.
So that's yeah, that is very interesting, and the two alternatives that you gave us, right? So you can start
Yeah.
early, and then you will have a lot, or ideally a lot of success. You can start later in the season. You may have later smaller success, but I mean, depending on where you are.
Still a
Uh-huh.
success depending how you look at it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, but what
Yeah.
you're saying, but that is true. I mean, I think in number of plants, but I think the key point here is that what you really want is to make sure that the plants that make it are the ones that are more environmentally adapted. And I think
Yeah.
that is very important.
So in my case, I'm actually farming such a small amount. Like I mentioned, I only have like 5 acres, but I've, probably sold out, enough agave to plant out, right now around almost 1,000 acres, right? So I've had a larger influence than just my farm by propagating so much out. But I mentioned that because I can have plants die and try to prioritize the genetics for me in the industry, and I'm fine with that because I only need so many plants specifically for me. So it may be that a small farmer or a medium-sized farmer, whatever size, they may propagate more than what they actually need to just actually find out what the best genetics are, right? So um, it's not a loss, I think, if you're getting better genetics to have mass plant loss, right? And um, you can only really do that if you're propagating it all from seed or bugel because the plants are so expensive. I mean, when I tell people I'm okay with losing, 10 or 50,000 plants, it seems ridiculous to them, but it's because I know these plants are going to make me a lot more in the long run through the genetics. So it's all in the, a balance, I guess. But yeah, so I wanted to go into like what my, you know, I guess model of dry farming is.
Please
And
do, please do.
I'm modeling it on a lot of what the indigenous and my grandparents were doing in Jalisco. I've kind of just brought that with a small couple twists to the California desert because it's a little bit of a tougher climate. So, dry farming to me is just running your whole farm off of no irrigation. So you may not have any sprinklers or drip lines, but you may still have, rainwater that you capture throughout the year that you could use to propagate and to, plants that, are at a weak point, you could still, irrigate them through rainwater. So this just means that you're not irrigating through any form of surface, well, or city water. It doesn't mean that you're not irrigating. So that's a common confusion sometimes with a lot of people too. Like, I first got established with dry farming, vineyards, and a lot of my consulting work was on that. And, that always amazed me because people thought that we were never watering the grapes, but we're establishing the grapes, say up to 8 months or 15 months, and that's where we cut off the water. And agave is very similar in terms of how you're going to be going about that. So that's why I mentioned that you want to plant them in the rainy season so that they're established by the end of it, right? Because you could technically plant out in summer or fall, and you're going to be using a lot of irrigation water to establish those plants, but you could dry farm, say, a year from that. So that may be a technique that people even utilize that have the water resources, and then they could utilize those fields' water for other fields that they may have fallowed or need more significant irrigation, right? So um, it just means, like I mentioned, that you're not using any added irrigation, right? So solely what falls on that field, what you're capturing, and here on the land, I can mention my goat pens, my uh, my geese and my chicken and quail pens, my garages, all of my structures have roofs with metal and rain gutters, and so it has a metal roof and then gutters that can capture all of this and go into you know, uh, rain capture barrels or totes. And, I probably capture around, 20 to 25,000 gallons of water every year. And I'm trying to add capacity every year, but to give an idea of how much water I may use on, trying to run my 5 acre farm, I'm only using around 60,000 gallons of water a year. And 30,000 of those gallons is actually just the nursery. So I'm about 90% running just off of rainwater. And the other water I may, uh, you could say actually that the majority of the plants, like over 90% are run off of just rainwater. So that the additional water that I actually need for my farm is not for the plants, it's for the animals. So I have to order, fresh water for the animals. And I try to still recycle that water 2 or 3 times. So, I may give it out to a goat, and then after a day or two, I may throw it on trees or try to do different things. That I need around the farm with that. But dry farming to me also means that you're trying to mimic a lot of what I mentioned, the traditional ecological knowledge, what a lot of people may refer to as permaculture or regenerative farming. You're really trying to improve the soil health on your farm so that every single rainstorm it could capture more and more and more water. And I could give an example here on fields that I have, where I've thrown out tons of mulch and compost from my goats and my birds and stuff that I develop. And, I make compost teas and throw it out there as well. Um, all of those fields are able to capture sometimes 2 to 4 times as much water as the fields that have no added, manure or mulch or stuff like that, right? So that field, for instance, could hold that water for several months longer, allowing me to start dry farming crops in that field much sooner and for a much longer time period. So the soil health is the number one thing. And really, I'm not tilling any of my fields because I want to maintain, the bacteria, the fungi, the protozoa networks that are going on underground, absorbing all that water, right? So, um, I could give an example. Some of the agaves that I may pull out of those fields to sell to into landscaping may carry, a 2 foot agave may have 4 or 5 feet of roots. And you go over to a field that, doesn't have any of those soil amendments, and you may only have 8 to 15 inches of roots. So because these agave aren't having, are being planted in fields with soil amendments, they're not able to put down deep roots where that water is being kept subsurface. So that's another issue. If you irrigate a lot, these agaves won't put down deep roots. So a common thing I see and hear about in gardens are that agave have really shallow roots, 4 to 8 inches. And that's a lot of the times due to having so much irrigation that they have no need to put down deep roots. So
Yeah.
it's almost like you have to, if you want to be a dry farmer, allow your plants to suffer consistently, not to a point of detriment, but suffer consistently to where they are adapting themselves to these water stresses. And that's why I say you have to do a lot of biomimicry on a dry farm. Here in the Antelope Valley, we had, natural pronghorns that were taken out. And I'm trying to plant in tandem with a lot of the native plants that I have here. And I'm using the goats as like a replication of the pronghorns so that I may, for instance, build up all these soil profiles. And, I may have 40 to 50% of soil coverage with these native plants. And now I'm planting agave, cactus, and running my goats in the other 50% where they're at. And in that soil, I see it improving so much to where the grasses have doubled or tripled in many of these areas. And the goats and the agave and cactus are actually creating their own ecosystem and helping the natives, and the natives help them. So instead of clearing a land, how I did at the beginning, now I'm really adamant about not clearing anything. And this is something I've spread into my consulting work as well, because um, keeping the natives is really how you get to a great dry farming ecosystem, because I don't really have much pressure from gophers and jackrabbits and coyotes and stuff like that, because I'm planting alongside with the natives, so I'm not getting rid of their food, and I'm only adding to it. So I plant a lot of cactus with my agave directly as a trap plant to be, for instance, agave, if the piña is eaten, you've lost that plant. But cactus, it could be eaten down to the ground and come back, within a few weeks. So if I put that right next to an agave, I know that I can get, a squirrel or a jackrabbit fed much more quicker, and they know that as well, that it's much more full of water. So they're going to go for these much more water full plants, you could say, like cactus. And then you may also, if you're in an area where, you could dry farm a plant like nasturtiums, you may plant nasturtiums, as a ground cover trap plant to get, deer, for instance, even pests like aphids will go straight to a nasturtium versus an agave if it's right next to it. Um,
And
a lot of
Steve,
those pests, you can
one
get
thing that
trap
I
plants
wanted
to help you.
one thing that I
Yeah.
wanted to bring here, and just want to be perfectly clear. So you were saying that you use 60,000 gallons in your operations a year, but
Yeah.
30,000 gallons are for the nursery. So I'm
Yeah.
assuming that the remaining 30,000 gallons will be for your agriculture operation,
Yes, but that's including,
the
the
goats.
goats. So I would
But
say I probably spend less than like 5,000 gallons of water on the whole acreage a year.
and I was
But
kind of,
the
I mean,
but the animals take up quite a bit.
Yeah, because basically 5,000 gallons is less than a tenth of an acre foot. And
Yeah.
you have 5 acres. So this is
Yeah.
really like minimal. I mean, when you were discussing about Sigma, so they are now providing 3 or 4 inches of water per acre in a point 0.3, point 0.2 acre feet per acre. So it's a
Yeah.
very small amount. This is
Well, that's why I
even less
was
than that
talking about the
one.
aquifers a lot because,
Mhm.
I've done the math on a lot of these water intensive agave species like Espadín or Tequiliana. And, it's going to be really tough to scale an industry off agave with really water intensive agave, right? Because, one farm, if they're using 6 inches of irrigation per acre, which some of these large Tequiliana farms are, they're using half of 326,000 gallons per acre. And then you times that by what many of them want, which is 500 or 1,000 acres. And then, if you just have 100 of those guys, you're using, 50,000 acre feet.
Yeah, one
And to put how much 50,000 acre feet is, right? So the math there that I've done is you have 100 farmers growing agave tequiliana that have 1,000 acres, and they irrigate 6 inches of groundwater, right?
yeah,
Or
Rafa.
well water.
Uh-huh.
50,000 acre feet is a significant added input into well systems.
Mhm.
So 50,000 acre feet, for instance, this whole city of LA only takes 40,000 acre feet from the Colorado River. Like this
Yeah,
is a lot, it's a lot of water.
it is a lot of
So
water.
I realized I wasn't going to be able to get a well cleared one to take that much water, even if I had the money, you know. And the farmers that unfortunately have those wells in store already, they're probably going to get regulated and not be allowed to pump that water.
Correct.
So I realized I would love to grow agave tequiliana. My family has fields full of it, but it's just, in my area, it's not going to be a crop that is feasible to be
Yeah,
one, dry farmed, and two, irrigated sustainably.
yeah.
So,
And the
it
other
just
part,
it inspired me because of tradition, but it's not something that I could continue here. Yeah.
and the point that you were making also of letting the plants struggle a little bit so they can put deeper roots. I always mention that when we irrigate, we make the roots lazy, that they just stay shallow so they can capture all that
Yeah.
moisture. But if we stress them out, we
Because
will
they have
make them.
no incentive to. Yeah.
And
So a
so
lot of
it really goes to
water,
your point. Mhm.
soil scientists and consultants know it'll go down 3 or 4 feet. But your plants, if it only has roots down in that 1 foot, subsoils, it has no access to that water. So by stressing those plants, it's putting roots into the subsoils, anywhere from 2 to 4 feet, which is where a large majority of that water is stored. So, once it reaches that zone is really when I say it's ready to be dry farmed or established, because that subsoil, a lot of it evaporates and a lot of that is not really available to the plant. Um, but yeah, I wanted to talk about, a lot of the other plants that I may use. For instance, a lot of people ask me what I do for fertilization on a dry farm, and I tell them, I'm not really fertilizing anything, besides or synthetically. I'm using, goat waste or compost and, green waste, and I'm also planting lots of leguminous trees like palo verde or mesquite or acacia, with the intention that they're going to nitrogen fixate for me, and they're right next to the agaves planted in tandem, so that those trees, as they grow, can provide shade microclimates to establish smaller plants, and also for the larger plants, give them the nitrogen that they may need because they're fixating that into the soil. So, a prosperous agave dry farm is going to require you to plant, for instance, multiple agave species, multiple different other species like trees or cacti that may serve as trap or plants that may fertilize your crops. And the multi-species I mentioned, because on a dry farm, you're not going to be, I don't do any chemicals in a dry farm. If you're not doing irrigation, most of the chemicals and spraying is done during irrigation. So, if you don't have even the ability to utilize chemicals really, and you're not going to be able to spray your plants or do any type of insecticide, herbicide, or pesticide, you really need to have species diversity, because it's not that I don't get plagues or I don't get, infestations, but it's limited, because for instance, I may have an agave, a cactus, and a tree, and different agave species. By the time that agave meets another plant that is its same species or subspecies, it's pretty far out. So it's not spreading like wildfire, and I can notice it, and that agave is just replaced with something else. So, you are always needing to stay propagating so that you can do stuff like that. And I think that actually helps you when it comes to harvest time, because you have lots of different ages of agave, you know, harvesting at different years. Because if everything harvests in one year, what if it's a bad year to harvest and prices are low? You may be stuck in a tough situation there. But as I mentioned, learned a lot from vineyard systems, and what I wanted to copy that the vineyard systems have in California is really having like a vertically integrated operation too. So a lot of them, they're growing dry farm grapes, and then they're processing and manufacturing them and making their own wine on site. So agave is a crop that could pretty much follow this same model. You could dry farm it in California, you can manufacture and process it on site, and you can, even if you want, you can make agave wine from it. I mean, technically, there is lots of brands that are bringing out agave wine now, but you can make agave spirits from it. And I tell people too, agave is a diverse crop. You don't necessarily need to limit yourself to even with alcohol, like just agave spirits. It could be made into brandy, or it could be made into vodka or wine, or you can make agua miel, pulque distillates, agua miel distillates. That's just like the broad of alcohol, but then you can get into biofuels, inulin, and fiber products and clothes, and the list. It really is like 1,000 uses that you can make from it. So it's a great crop that allows for vertically integration as on the business side as well. But as I mentioned, we haven't really had any water resources added into California since the 70s, and we've doubled and tripled the economy. So a lot, even big desal plants like the one built in Carlsbad, they're only supplying like 10% of the region's, water. So when you really look at it, we have to be more and more efficient with our water resources. And a lot of the water that's being used today is going into grapes. So my work with consulting has also been trying to get a lot of those you know farmers that are in vineyards onto agave and cactus, because it's a very familiar system for them, right? They already know how to make wine from an agricultural commodity like that. So, and if anything, to a vineyard that's growing agave, they can make wine from a crop that uses 95% less water than grapes. That sounds pretty attractive for a lot of the vineyards. So I mentioned that because grapes is the number one planted crop in California, and it's also, obviously because of that, one of the biggest water users in the state. And today we need to cut around 100,000 acres of grapes. In my opinion, as a vineyard consultant, we probably need double that. But this is a point where agave could come in and help these vineyards, because it's a similar crop that they can, they may not be familiar with it, but they already have a lot of the land, the water resources, the laborers, that many of them are Latin American, that have worked on agave farms in Mexico. So I think it's going to be a ripe scenario for a lot of vineyards to convert into agave, and that's how California can take off a lot of water pressure from their aquifers and surface waters, because they're one of the biggest water users. Um, but I wanted to also talk about how agave could fit in with, land or agave culture conservation, because a lot of the species that I'm growing are native California species, and I'm growing them with the intention of you know, yes, I'm dry farming them because they're natives and they don't really need a lot of additional irrigation. But I also realize that a lot of these agaves are going to be needed for restoration in California or Nevada or the Southwest. And a lot of these plants aren't, they're not available. So it's like if you want to do restoration of agave showy, no one really has, hundreds or thousands of plants like that to where you can actually, restore an ecosystem like that. And I mentioned cultural restoration as well because I give an example of agave roasts that are done here in Southern California by the Morongo tribe. They only can do a harvest once a year, and it's a very minimal harvest of agave deserti, which is a California native that they're roasting up. And they don't really have the plants to preserve their culture, I would say. So it's like if as farmers we can, start to grow a lot of these plants and help restoration and give them, maybe a small percentage out to indigenous groups for their own restoration and cultural, help. I think that would be great as well because they're the ones that have kept this plant one for all of us for these thousands of years here in California. But at the same time, we don't know how they're going to utilize it when they have a large amount of this resource, right? So we've learned so much of them from just the small glimpses of history. But if they actually had this resource again, they could actually probably show us a lot of how to utilize that agave here in California again. Um, but yeah, as I mentioned, I'm growing agave alongside a lot of my native species, and I am not taking out any natives anymore, because I see agave could grow in tandem with a lot of these plants, and I really like to think of my farm as a dry garden, right? Trying to leave only really as much space as I need to bring in a wheelbarrow or some small, amount of people to harvest something. And I say like a garden because, like in a garden, you only have a couple paths to access the whole garden, and it's really full. And you have all these relationships between, agave and cacti and trees and shrubs that allow everything to really, create an ecosystem and be successful together. And then the best thing you could do as a dry farmer is try to copy what I call ecosystem farming, which is trying to recreate an ecosystem, or if you have an ecosystem, not trying to destroy it, just trying to improve it by improving the soil and over time improving the genetics that you may add to those agave farms. Um, so that's why I mentioned the biomimicry, because that's just really trying to see what nature is doing and trying to copy the different techniques of, for instance, nature in an area where ecosystem may be really prosperous. Obviously, it captures lots of water in its soil. It has really healthy soil. So it's like you have to learn from nature to try to copy these systems so that you can do the same on your land, right? So not all lands are going to be the the same there, but yeah. Also, I wanted to talk about how dry farming could really help out California's ranchers. So we have like 35 million acres of rangeland in California, and California is one of the biggest cattle industries, one of the biggest sheep, and now becoming one of the biggest goat industries. And agave could really be a crop that could be used for animal silage and forage, and that's how I use it here. So, probably 25% of my goats and bird, food consumption is just agave and cactus, and it's mostly being dry farmed. So, if you can dry farm a crop and not use fertilizers, not pay for water, and you're not paying for a lot of maintenance and labor because of how you're using these animals to maintain these fields, then those agaves will become more prosperous for you, and those goats will become more prosperous for you. So it's really a reinforcing, system like that. And then a lot of the animals obviously are creating the fertilizers for my plants, and I don't have to weed my fields. When I want a new field to be cleared of dead stuff, of the dead natives, I just put the goats in there, and then I can easily plant after. And even at harvest time, I'll let the goats in there and I won't let them get out, and they'll just leave me with straight piñas. They'll eat up all the leaves. So it's like I've already even used the goats to prepare, to maintain, and to harvest fields. And, ideally, I want to start using burros to even move those piñas down, to sections where I can, put them into trucks and stuff. So the animals can help you be a better agave farmer, and the agave can help you be a better, rancher. Because my goats are only profitable for me because I'm giving them so much agave and cactus that I'm spending less on water, and they're also, having to be foraged less, and I really don't buy any feed unless I have to go into town for multiple days or something. So when I'm out here on the farm, they're eating and foraging, and that animal is bringing me, a much higher profit because it's just running off of agave and forage, right? So, um, we have 5 billion in just cattle alone in California that could probably be benefit from this, right? And even in areas where it gets cold, you can turn agave into silage and then feed it to them in the winter. So if a rancher can produce its own food through agave and cactus for the majority of the year, you could probably give that up to, 60% of the diet of your animal. So I've seen some of these rancher, bills for their feed, and I mean, it's real significant for many of them. I mean, you're talking for large operations, maybe spending 50 to, 150,000 on just alfalfa alone every year. If they can now supplement that with, agave or cactus, then you can, allow that rancher to be much more profitable.
Mhm.
And, that may be an industry that really develops in California because of, just how many animals we have here. Because if that could be just a tad cheaper than what's available today on the market, then agave farmers have billions that they could sell in that. Um,
Hey, Steve,
so
we're
yeah,
we're
there's a
we're
lot that
coming.
that dry farming could benefit with. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm glad that you're mentioning from regular, well, not regular, but the setting of agriculture to cattle and ranching and all the different practices. I'm just looking at the time, and I want to make sure that we left time for people to have
Yeah.
questions. So, and we have a lot of traffic on the
Yeah,
chat.
you could, it's a
So
topic, dry farming agave. You could definitely talk about it for several
yeah,
hours.
and
But
I think in the
yeah.
meantime, if anyone wants to go there, I was actually trying to do my homework here, and let me see if just for a tiny bit, I really want to share with our folks this video that I took, Steve, if you allow me, of your
Yeah,
farm,
go for it.
and let me see. Okay, I'm just okay. Let me do this, and then I'm putting here, and I will restart it. So this is Steve's Farms. You can actually see all the different plants. Something that I do want to mention is this, right? What you were mentioning, Steve, which is
Yeah.
the nopales close to it, so they prevent
Yeah.
pests to actually go into your.
And if you
We,
walk that line, you'll see all of them are bit up, but
oh
they're
yeah,
prosperous. Yeah,
yeah,
they're
yeah.
growing amazingly. Yeah.
And also you can see here like how you're planting some of them, well, different ages,
Yeah. Different
and
ages and species, so the harvesting is all staggered.
correct, and the some of them are more vigorous, less vigorous, but
Hmm.
you're just keeping an eye to see which ones are going to be more. Yeah, we can see here different ones. um you're gonna see here Jesse taking a look at one of the species, and
Yeah, it's
then
Paria truncata, which is one that it has like zero damage. It's probably one of the ones I've identified to be best dry farmed out here.
yeah, and let me just see if I can so just show some of the plants that you have in your farm. And in the meantime, I'm not sure if anyone wants to unmute and ask a question, but so,
We have the questions.
oh, let me see. So, well, I'll do this. So here, sorry, and I need to go here. So we have two questions. Okay, so from Armando Torres.
Yeah.
Okay, so we hear a lot about how California's wine industry is collapsing. Are you aware of any vineyards that have started to replace grapes with agave?
Yeah. I've been a part of both of those. So, I mean, like, unfortunately, like we've, when I started in vineyard consulting, we were like, it seemed like everybody was just expanding acreage like crazy and getting like really, really rich off of grapes. So when I started consulting in like 2015, 2016, um, it was just an era of unlimited growth. And now a lot of those farmers are bankrupt. Many of them can't sell their grapes. Distributors have like 3 years of inventory, tariffs, and, not being able to export. I mean, it will be lucky if three-fourths of the grape farmers make it the next 3 years. And that's why I was saying, like, that's a significant amount of acreage that I'm trying to work on because many of these farmers may be in a position where they could switch and farm agave and cactus and still maintain profitability. And many of them are at a point that I'm not, there to help them anymore. Like they collapsed and the farm is sold to someone new. And they're saying, we don't want to do the same thing. They weren't making any money. That's why they went bankrupt and came to us and had to sell to us. So a lot of the times the people that come and look for me to plant agave on vineyards are new ownership, and they're coming in and saying, we want to do the smart thing. We've got a lot of land, we've got a lot of water. What can we do here, Steve? And to be honest with them, a lot of them are finding a lot of success in cactus because they can sell cactus or agave and cactus because they can sell those plants as various products right away the first year. Whereas those grapes right now they're not just able to sell it. So I'm actually seeing a lot of those vineyards convert to agave. But when I say a lot, it's like as a consultant, all the vineyards I'm pushing towards agave are trying to do it. So it's like I may be a biased and it may be a small portion, but 150,000 acres going out in the past 2 years, 3 years alone of grapes, that's significant enough. That could be easily taken out of fallow and put to agave or cactus right away, and you can still make wine. So that means that those wine manufacturing, processing, wine the vineyard or the winemakers, they still all have jobs. So I mean, when the farms leave, imagine when 150,000 acres of grapes goes out of fields, right? Like that's tens of thousands of jobs probably that are
Mhm.
lost, from people that work with that farm. So I think a lot of the stuff that could save California is actually going to be switching to agave or cactus.
Yep, yep, I agree. We have other questions in here. So one is from Felix. Hi, can you share a locally nursery for agave? So we will send that one, and of course,
Yeah.
with you, Steve. I mean,
Yeah.
we can pass your name and how can they contact you?
Mhm.
Yeah.
I was just looking at this one, like it really. I mean, this one doesn't look that, but let me see. This one, you can see here the hijuelos,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
right next to a cactus that
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
eaten by a gopher. And
Mhm.
this is like
Yeah.
literally like you can see that they could have gone through this very vulnerable hijuelo, but no, they prefer the nopales. And
To eat the nopales.
yeah, look, like here you can see the different bites.
Yeah.
So anyway, this is a very good
Strategy.
strategy. Like
Yeah.
let them eat, but eat what you and
Yeah, I
these
finally just
nopales, no?
decided they're like more helpful actually than like trying to get rid of them because instead of poisoning your soil or like trying to, hurt the animals, I mean, I just made them like unpaid consultants basically. So wherever they're digging holes, I know it's compacted and needs soil amendments, and I just make sure after they're in that area and have, maybe bid in a few cactus to just go over there and plant a few more cactus and just amend the soil a bit. So they actually now are really helpful of, explaining to me like the soil on my farm because nature put them there for a reason.
One other thing that I wanted to bring everyone's attention. So this is a plant that, I mean, right now is extremely vigorous. You can see it here. But not only vigorous, like look all the hijuelos that has around it.
Yeah.
Like look at this
Yeah,
plant.
it's one of the
So we have environmentally adaptive and very fertile. Like this plant, my friends, is doing
that's
both.
a 3-year-old agave and it produced like 100 and now it's like 170 huelos because I'm harvesting them too, so I keep track of it.
So you can actually see like, look, this is I mean, we have others. Like look how this looks super vigorous. Like these are, I always say that when I look a plant like this, that it is like bending their muscles. Like you can see the pencas like really standing up. Anyway, we
We
have
have other questions.
which other one?
Other one.
So do you think this would be a sustainable food source system for them, meaning the protein from the bean pods, leaves from the moringa and the nopal cactus for fiber, and water could be enough to sustain a small herd?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, when like I'm a gardener and landscaper and, obviously a farmer, so I'm cutting all the trees here and that system is called silviculture. So I
Mhm.
plant lots and lots of trees here to basically feed my animals. They turn that into goat poop and manures, and then I can re-put that on the fields, and it's just a constant cycle of like them making more food for themselves and giving more food to the trees, right? So really what you have to have for a balanced diet, like I mentioned, you could put 50-60% agave and cactus, and that's going to give them half of their water, going to give them all of their fiber. The problem is just two fibers. So you need to supplement with another 40 to 50% with how you mentioned either moringa, palo verde, acacia, mesquite. All of these could be dry farmed really easily off of minimal water, and then you can feed your animals that, and then you can grow lots of successful profitable animals that way. So
Yeah.
that,
Look,
that that would be a balanced diet. Yeah.
yeah, look another very healthy plant, very healthy agave, and look all the hijuelos. Like look all around it. Like my friends, this is just showing a lot of good fertility. And I think this goes to kind of planting it at the right time because this is the desert. So planting it at the right time, then taking care, as you were saying, the first year is not that you're just gonna leave it without any
Yeah.
care. Seeing which are the ones that are making it, then letting make the plant struggle so it will go to deep roots, and then dry farming. And this is quite impressive. Let's go with one last one, and then I want to give you time for you. Okay, so from Conrad, what soil and amendment are you using to propagate?
um I'm just using a combination of goat poop and or rabbit poop with clay sandy soil here native to the farm. So that's the other thing too. Like probably by the end of this year, I'll have like 1 million plants in cultivation from both my farm and the greenhouses. So it's like I just really need to like not be buying soil, or I'm gonna just be spending like $1 million on soil pretty soon. So I started testing rabbit poop, bird poop with the native soil, 50-50, and then the store-bought soil. And a lot of my manures mixed with the native soil is beating out the store-bought soil. And I'm noticing that, the soil from the desert, like I mentioned, it's mostly clay loam mixed. So that soil, if water hits, it's not leaving for several months. You get me? Like that soil knows how to keep that water. Like people ask me all the time, how do desert plants grow? It's because the soil and the plants, as soon as any water hits, they're not letting anything leave. So I realized that trait, and then I combine it with the manures to have some, organic and some green. And then as a 50-50, I'm realizing that's just an affordable and in many cases better than store-bought. So if you want to scale, a nursery or an agave farm, uh, you can easily, if you're in the desert, utilize your native soil in combination with just some animals you may have, because it starts to get really, really expensive. And once again, kind of like with my fields and creating all these additional resources for me, um, you know, the plants will be more profitable if you're not buying soil, fertilizers, all of these things. Because when I sell a plant, it's almost 100% profit because I grew it, I use the fertilizer soil that I make and soil that I make. So I'm not buying anything to create that plant.
Yeah.
And I'm actually planting most of them in the ground now because I'm trying to get away from plastic waste for the same reason that I'm not trying to have a million plastic pots. It's one, expensive, and it's hard to scale that way. If I can plant, stronger and stronger genetics out in the field sooner, then I don't need any pots. And, that's something I learned from, also indigenous people in Mexico, because they don't use pots, many of them. They're just planting in the ground and making little rudimentary shade
Yeah,
houses.
in the
And
Almacid.
that stuff is going far as heck for them. So, you know, I I told you I come from the nursery trade here a lot too, but that doesn't mean that I have to copy an American way to scale. You get
Yep.
me? Like as a Mexican, I was born in Mexico. I lean on my Mexican friends and family a lot to learn when I have a problem. And when I told my cousin, I said, he's an agave farmer too in Mexico, and I told him I'm having a lot of plastic waste. What's your recommendation? He said, choose the strongest agaves, put them in the field, the weakest in the space you have. And then, if you get to the point where you fill everything up, start making little, cheap shade houses for those weaker agave outdoors. And I said, you know what? He's right. That's going to be way cheaper in the long run to propagate millions of agave because, yeah, once again, it just starts getting really expensive and detrimental to the environment. So.
Yeah. Wait.
And that may be actually where you make agave pots. I mean, like a lot of this fiber can be pressed into a pot form pretty easily. So I think, if you can make a compostable agave pot, you may have something there because us big growers, we're looking to shift away from plastic, but every other option like bamboo is extremely expensive. So in this ground works better today.
And Steve, we're coming close to the time, but actually, I would like just to a shout out for Nick Torres. Don't forget to check out the Steve website,
Yeah.
agavecaliforniano.com. So just be aware, check that out.
Yeah, agaverocaliforniano.com. I was
Agavero
gonna say too, if anyone
Californiano.
has a question, they can
Yeah,
they can definitely email you or Yessie or me with the question, and I can definitely help you with anything dry farming agave
yes.
related. So if I didn't get to your question, then just make sure to reach out, and we'll try to help you out.
Yeah, and we have a lot of comments here. Any last word, Steve, before we close this up?
Um, I was just gonna say that dry farming has a huge potential in California to be the future of how
Mhm.
we do agriculture here. So, I think that more people should be learning about it. And hopefully, it's like the first of a couple talks of not only me, but other people that talk about this because, um, I've managed to help some pretty large farmers adapt to
Mhm.
dry farming. Like I've, got right now a 100-acre vineyard as a dry farm and a 40-acre agave farm as a dry farm. So this isn't something that can only be a small scale system, how a lot of people believe. It can be something that's, scaled to 1,000 or 2,000 acres. It just needs to be done, with patience and be a little intelligent in how you do it. And
Mhm.
you don't need to create a new model or a lot of this stuff. As I mentioned, a lot of the knowledge that we need to apply actually is already, the indigenous have already figured that out. We just need to be utilizing, traditional ecological knowledge and permaculture to, take that out the past and bring it back. And people always tell me, industrial agriculture is the way for a reason, but I always tell them, it's only really been around for like 100 years. We use tractors and diesel to run our agriculture, whereas
Right.
dry farming took us thousands of years.
Yeah.
So, when I look towards the future of sustainable agriculture, I definitely think the past has more to teach than, all of this stuff we may be trying to come up with, right? Like we need to just maybe research and talk more with these indigenous.
So thank you so much. And I'm just kind of seeing here that yes, we will have your presentation recorded. We're gonna put it it's already on the YouTube channel. And thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining us.